This is Smart Investing with Mike.wren.
Securities and advisory service offered through KMS Financial Services.
This is Smart Investing with Michael J. Wren. With Michael's producer, Chris Martin. You can email us your questions. Go to smartinvestingshow.com to see how.
For I have the pride, the privilege, nay, the pleasure of introducing to you the one, the only.
This is Smart Investing with Mike.wren.
Well, hello, everybody. You have opened up another show, another episode of the Smart Investing Show, where one, we try to take the topic of investing and make it easier to understand. Number two, we try to get you good, relevant information on each and every show. And thirdly, we try to be entertaining. And with the entertaining portion, that's typically the producer extraordinaire, Mr. Chris Martin, sitting across the table from me. Mr. Chris, happy Good Friday to you.
This is a setup because you told me, and I'm 50 years old. I probably know what Good Friday is, but
well, all you need to know is the industry that I work in. Today's a day off. They close the markets on Good Friday, so it's a Good Friday.
It's a Good Friday.
Yeah, it's excellent. So years and years ago when I started in the mailroom, I used to love this because it was a 3-day weekend that you got thrown in there just as spring starts. So I would go hang out with my dad or something like that. But what was nice is the brokerage firm that I started with, it doesn't exist anymore, so I can say its name, Murphy Favor. Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. I didn't have anything to do with it, honest. So working in the mailroom there, Washington Mutual Bank, which also doesn't exist anymore, bought them.
I'm starting to see a pattern.
Yeah, me too. So it was always great to maybe go get some cash out down at the bank and say, oh, you guys have a good weekend. Oh, no, that's not Friday. No, it's Friday for me because I work in the upper echelon where we get the day off because,
All right.
I don't know.
It just sounds to me like it's one of those midsummer Easter break things that the kids have at school. That
it's an unintended day off that most people don't realize, and that's what makes it really, really good.
So do you still get clients that'll call you?
I don't know. I don't answer the
You
phone.
don't answer the phone either.
I'll know on Monday.
Oh, okay. Wow.
No, I'll check the phone, but I'll check it at my leisure.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because
All right.
everything's closed. What am I going to do? Well, obviously, I'll reassure them and give them perfect, caring investment advice like I usually do, but at a leisurely pace, not at a frantic pace that happens. And leisurely means, long cigarettes, thicker cigars, a bigger cup of coffee.
Longer curse words.
Right, longer curse words.
Do you freaking know what day it is?
Me petting that white cat on my like Dr. Evil.
You really go all out on this day. I know people that don't treat Halloween as much as you.
It's just, I love it. It's just like a little bit of an extra day. Like today I'll be driving up to see my dad because his birthday was yesterday. Today's the 18th, right?
19th.
19th. Yeah, his birthday was yesterday.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
so I'll go spend some time with Dad and ruin his day. No.
Holy crap, it's a Good Friday already. There goes my son.
Geez, Dad, you look old. No. No, so anyway, on today's show, I don't know exactly how long the show will be because I caught a head cold this week. So I'm not exactly sure, number one, how long the voice will stay in there. And number two, I want to make the show poignant. I just don't want to ramble on like a lot of other podcasts. There's a lot of rambling. So let's get right into what might be the meat of today's show. And something happened this week that was, actually quite extraordinary. It was one of the few times that you have something happen on a day that's actually important to a company or two. And what happened this week is all of a sudden you had Qualcomm and Apple. You remember that I did a podcast on those guys a while ago? Where
I do remember that.
Yeah, about how much they were fighting. Well, lo and behold, maybe like an hour after they have their opening arguments in the court, they just settle.
Oh, they didn't want a divorce. They found out that they truly did love each other.
Right.
They finally went, you know what, Your Honor, never mind.
So they just settled. And, as a little bit of a review for everybody, you have Qualcomm, which basically invented the way that we use a cellular phone. You would like to think that it was Apple and the iPhone. It's not. It's Qualcomm. They invented code division multiple access, CDMA technology, which meant that you can use, you could quadruple, double, triple, quadruple. I don't know the exact amount of subscribers on a cell phone tower. It's basically they digitized cellular communications, which made the phone go small from being a big thing, that big Motorola walkie-talkie that it looks like you'd be in a trench in World War II using it, calling in mortar fire, and that's how big the cell phones were.
No, I was just watching Wayne's World came on the other day, and I was watching, and Rob Lowe has this big fancy apartment and picks up his cellular phone, and it was
huge.
It was as big as his hand and the giant rubber antenna sticking out of it.
Yeah, now the only people that use phones like that are, I think, Navy SEAL people calling for help or adventurous that have been bitten by some weird snake, So anyway, Qualcomm, and if you looked up how many patents Qualcomm has, it might be in the triple digits as far as cell phones. And I also made the comment that I always was newsflash, what was Steve Jobs, founder of Apple. Nobody liked him. I know that he died early from cancer. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing from his family. I assume his family liked him. But business people didn't like him at all. He was an a-hole, okay? It's well known. And that's when it all started. He didn't want to use Qualcomm. He was forced to use Qualcomm. So they have kind of been, kind of quiet enemies, I think, for a long time.
Well, wasn't he the guy that, he wanted something, and then he would just go in there and go, build this, and then walk it. So, you would get the idea, but he didn't really build anything.
Well, it's kind of like Lance Armstrong. There's doing what you need to do to win, but then there's being an a-hole while you're doing what you need to do while you win. And
I thought it was really unprofessional when he would ride by people and go, I only have one ball. So hate that guy.
So anyway, now what you have is Tim Cook, which was, I think, man number 2 in charge of Apple, where he's the CEO, and I guess he's inherited the same thought process about Qualcomm. In other words, for all intents and purposes, it looks like he doesn't like them either. So they all of a sudden said, out of the blue, it's not like Qualcomm gave them a new contract a couple years ago. All out of the blue, Apple just said, we're not paying you anymore because we think it's too much. Pretty much that's what they said. So they started withholding payments. And Qualcomm said, oh, that's a fine kettle of fish. And so in the beginning, Mike Wren's point of view, right when this fight started, it's like, wow, Apple doesn't have a leg to stand on. And then as a year goes by, you find out that other countries in the world and other companies, they would have bad things to say about Qualcomm. In other words, that they operated in a very anti-competitive way. Now, anti-competitive, that is a weird sentence because a good race car driver would be anti-competitive if he won all the time.
That's what I was thinking. If they're the leader in their own technology,
right,
that's your own fault if you're second.
Exactly. So my feeling was, if you invent the cure that cures some disease, you get a huge reward for that, besides knowing how much you improved mankind. They pretty much invented the way the cell phone works right now, which is it's a fact. It's not my opinion. That's a fact, okay? So they deserve a lot of the trappings and a lot of the gifts from that. And then all of a sudden, somebody, admittedly almost one of the wealthiest companies in the world, decides that they're unhappy paying Qualcomm this. And you have Tim Cook at the head of that company, and the company happens to be based in the Bay Area. And need I go any further? All of a sudden, you have a company and a CEO that talks more about lifestyle choices than making money. Oddly enough, he's starting to talk about making money more when he's interviewed. Because why? Because the cell phone is maturing. Most people have the cell phone that they would like, and if you gave them the opportunity to keep it for a $100 battery instead of upgrading it for a $1,000 phone, they're going to take the former, which pretty much screws the cell phone maker, which would be Apple. So that's the big thing with Apple kind of lurching forward, is Apple is trying to get their revenues from someplace other than cell phones. They're trying to grow their business in a different way, and they're probably going to be pretty successful at it. A way to explain it to you, Chris, is remember when you and I were in high school and Sony was like the kick-butt company because you had the Sony Walkman and you had stereo stuff. And Sony was kind of like the high-tech consumer company where if somebody back in the day when there were still stereo shops, Sony...
Huppins, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. You'd have the stereo shop, and Sony would be the brand that even the people who weren't stereophiles knew about, audiophiles. But then you'd have these other kind of cool brands.
Well, kind of like saying Xerox. It was the leader at that time.
Yeah, so that's what Apple is today. So I think of Apple more as like a real fancy Sony of yesterday, almost like a combination between Sony and Procter & Gamble, because you can get what Apple offers in many different ways, but they package it kind of funny, and not funny, but fancy, and people like it. And it used to be that their computers were the only way, they were the de facto choice if you wanted to do any sort of graphics, and they probably still are that way. Probably if somebody's in the music industry, it's probably that way as well. I would imagine Microsoft's catching up because they have a lot of money too. They have a lot of research and development behind them. So, I digress. Apple's trying to move away, not necessarily move away, they're trying to grow their business in ways that they can more depend on rather than just selling the iPhone. And it's also, this is an opinion, it's speculation out there, that Apple may end up being the one company that interfaces between us and the healthcare industry. You've probably seen an advertisement or two where that guy is on the television saying that Apple pretty much saved his life because the heartbeat thing. So he went and got it checked out and found out that he had some. Okay. Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So the future, let me tell you, just because I really dislike the CEO doesn't mean I don't think that Apple has a bright future, because I think they very much do. But going back to them fighting with Qualcomm, they didn't want to pay Qualcomm these royalties. And they wanted to unite the world against them, and they basically sicked the cops on Qualcomm too. Basically like going to the principal, Chris was throwing spit wads the other day. I think you should watch him.
I'm looking at it was more like they just narked on their drug dealer and then refused to pay that much money for their drugs.
You're exactly correct. And so Qualcomm in turn countersued them and said, listen, not only has Apple not paid us in accordance with our contract, but they have leaked some of our technology to other chip manufacturers with the hope that these chip manufacturers can make the chips for them instead of us. That's a very simple way to put it. So, obviously, to repeat myself, more than a year ago, I thought Apple had this down to, I thought Qualcomm was going to be the ultimate winner, easily so. But you take social media, you take a very effective whiner, which is the CEO of Apple. You take the world as it is nowadays, and unfortunately, when you have social media, there's not a lot of people digging a ditch, building a house. There's not a lot of blue-collar labor, and the reason I say blue-collar is they typically know that SHIT flows downhill and payday is on Friday. And a lot of the world is that pragmatic. You need to know some basic truths in life, that you have to work hard to get ahead and blah, 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 blah. In the Bay Area, you just have to, own real estate to get ahead. And so after a year of PR, all of a sudden, to me, I start getting worried because, it's not black and white anymore. A year has gone by. The line has been kind of squiggled now. It's not a definite line. It's a squiggly line. And maybe there is something to, maybe Qualcomm has been behaving in a mean way instead of just in a very competitive way. Instead of them being the best, maybe they have not just been the best, but maybe they've been ruthless about it. okay? And there's an awful lot of lovely, ruthless people that made the United States with their companies, Henry Ford being one of them. So I started having second thoughts. And it's like, okay, so now it's not necessarily clear that Qualcomm will win this. And then I started figuring out who the judge was that was going to hear this case, which started this week. And this judge had already found a summary judgment against Qualcomm about a year ago. And I started thinking, that doesn't portend a very good future.
Did he have a little Apple iPod thing in his ear?
It's a she. I did some background. This is how thorough I get.
Wait a minute.
What?
Women can be judges?
God, Chris. God, you made everybody chuckle just now.
Now you're going to tell me that they can vote, too, and stuff.
The reason that you can get by with that is people know that you are not that way. I can't say something like that just because of what I do for a living, but you're the nicest guy that walks the face of the earth. You can get by with that.
I told one woman that, the giving childbirth, all that pain's in your head. Wow.
Oh, yeah, nice. You did not.
I had 5 out of 6 people laugh in the room because they knew me.
People that are listening, Chris is just pulling your chain right now. He's nothing like that. He's just trying out some new, probably material for the next dive bar. He's going to go stand up comedy at the next night.
So basically, what I'm saying is, they were buying drugs from a drug dealer. They didn't want to pay those prices for those drugs, so they narked on the drug dealer. Yep. Then the drug dealer said, oh, yeah, well, these guys are buying drugs from me. And then the other guy said, yeah, but they're being mean because they're telling us you love these drugs. You can't get away from these drugs.
Well, yeah, and I started to think, well, maybe there is something to this company. Maybe they have been behaving in a ruthless way instead of just a competitive way, because there is a difference.
Which, as a layman, I'm going to say is weird because I hear Apple in the news all the time. I hear Microsoft in the news. I don't hear Qualcomm did this really badly in the news all the time.
Well, it's because the journalists don't know who the hell they are. You're dealing with people that can barely think, writing articles for the internet now. So the Qualcomm is not going to get any traction because unless somebody has heard of Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego, they don't know who the hell it is. So, or unless they remember their Qualcomm phone from 1997 or 98. So anyway, back to this situation, I start thinking, oh crap, it might not work out that well for Qualcomm. So I start having second thoughts because when this lawsuit happened, it's like, okay, I'm going to double down on Qualcomm. I'm going to double the amount of shares that I have out there. And then I start thinking, oh gosh, in this day and age, I can easily see some judge. Oh, I was going to say the judge that was going to be doing the ruling, Arnold Schwarzenegger appointed her. She is either the first female federal district court judge in the Marin County area, and she's either Vietnamese or Korean, some sort of background, and apparently like an awesome person. I did as much reading as I could. I couldn't find any biases or anything like that I could discern. So all I had to go on was that she had already ruled a summary judgment against Qualcomm. And I thought that didn't look so good. So I went through a period of about 3-4 months that it's like, wow, I better get what's going to happen after Qualcomm loses this battle, because it looks like the world thinks that Apple's great and Qualcomm sucks. So, what happens then? Well, Qualcomm still has the world's lead in research and development, especially in this new 5G technology that's now being not re-released, but now being released. So anyway, it's like, okay, that's going to happen. They still have the lead, so they're definitely going to get beat up near term, but long term, their research and development is still going to lead the day, because all of a sudden you started hearing leaks that even though Apple was feeding information to Intel and some of these other companies, if you'll remember one of the prior podcasts, Intel won't release a 5G chip for cell phones for another year. Qualcomm has already released their second generation.
Oh.
Okay? This is what happened. So we find out this week that they go to start arguing against each other, and then within an hour or so, they all of a sudden settle. And in the settlement, it turns out that not only has Apple paid Qualcomm $6, $7, $8 billion, all the royalties that they were due, but they inked another 6-year deal to buy chips with them. Then all of a sudden, 3 hours later, we have a news release from Intel that says, by the way, that 5G chip that we're making, we're not going to make it anymore. We're failed. We can't do it. We're not going to be, we've decided to exit that business. So I am thinking that Intel somehow, right before the court, I'm thinking that Intel told Apple that said that we're not going to be able to come through for you. You're not going to be able to get any 5G chips from us because we don't know how to make them yet. And it's odd. I would think that probably Apple found that out right as the court proceedings started. Wouldn't you think? I'm thinking that they started the arguments, and then if they had a little quick break or they had, maybe a break for lunch, all of a sudden the break for lunch turned out we better settle this straight away because they don't have a second option for their 5G chips. So this week started with Qualcomm trading like $57 a share, 56, 55, and now it's ended the week at like $80 a share. That's a pretty significant increase.
So,
and that's not a just like, oh my gosh, it's a whimsical increase. No, that is a
oh look, Harold, a whimsical increase.
Well, you know what I mean. It's based on fact that they are getting cash from Apple, and they're going to be getting cash from Apple in the future. And Qualcomm said, oh, by the way, you can add another $2 a share in earnings in our stock because the bastards finally paid us. Well, that jumped the stock, and now you know what somebody like me, Mike Wren, went through emotionally dealing with this over the last 2-3 years. Because ultimately, I'm okay with Apple losing that lawsuit because I felt that they had such a leading position in 5G technology that it would end up being a pretty steep drop and then a pretty steep recovery. Because even though they, this lawsuit,
it was coming.
Yeah, this lawsuit was about how they make their money too. It was going to take away a percentage of their royalties and all of that. And all of a sudden now it just goes away. So you can see that if Apple was trying to save the world, it's weird that they're not trying to save the world anymore, isn't it? Then they thought Qualcomm was so bad. And now all of a sudden, we're not going to fight anymore.
Your Honor, I don't like Qualcomm anymore. We can't get along. We can't see eye to eye. I know we've been married for a long time, but I got to get out of here. And by the way, I'm cheating on Intel. Hang on. It's Intel on the phone. She says she wants a Ferrari. She says I need to spend more money on her. I'm going to break up with her. I'm going to stay with my wife. Sorry, Your Honor. This has all been for nothing. I'm going to stay with the one that I've been with.
And I was getting a little bit concerned on how clients would react because most of my clients have money invested in Qualcomm because of my advice. And
so do you have people that are invested in like Intel that just go, I didn't see that coming?
No, Intel didn't go down because Intel hasn't made any money doing those types of chips yet anyway.
Oh, okay.
Intel actually went up because people finally said, oh, well, they weren't going to do it anyway, so...
Oh.
They were kind of being forced.
I'll stay with them. I don't have a lot of faith they're going
somewhere. The lines are being blurred, but Intel and Qualcomm definitely have their expertises, and they don't cross. They're different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is fine. And like I said, Apple's future is good too. I think Apple's got a great future. They're being able to grow their service business more quickly than they are able to sell more iPhones, which is good for Apple too. That's one of the reasons why the future looked bright, and I couldn't figure out why Apple was trying to beat up on Qualcomm so severely. It's like they were bound and determined to bankrupt them, and that didn't happen. You even had some short sellers in the industry, which are people that typically try to say so much bad news about a company that they want it to go down in price, so they profit from that. That you even had those people coming out of the woodwork to start to throw mud at Qualcomm, and it's like, And I also made the comment that Tim Cook, You know, one of his biggest claims to fame is he used to work with Steve Jobs and the way that he runs his personal life because, you know, he's not married to a woman, he's married to another guy, which is not a big deal, but he kind of makes a big deal out of that. Where the CEO of Qualcomm, what his claim to fame is 14 electrical engineering patents that have to do with the cell phone. So I made a comment on a podcast that I'll take the second guy. I'll take the guy with the patents. You know,
I'm already wondering if he's single.
So anyway, it worked out well this week for many investors. I think Qualcomm is vindicated. I'm glad because it started. If they would have lost the court case, it's like contract law doesn't matter in a democracy anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was it was starting to weigh on my spirit a little bit in that regard because it would have been somebody that lost a court case that didn't deserve to lose a court case. And I know that happens every day, but still, that's how your investment person here, Mike Wren, was thinking about that. And I was also worried about how my clients were going to deal with a negative outcome as far as a case as well. So it was nice to have that lifted. It's nice that all the companies involved have bright futures. And that gives you a little bit of an insight as to the emotions up and down that somebody like me that's completely squared away, I start to worry about how clients will view that position. So we talked about what? Microsoft, we've talked about Intel, we've talked about Qualcomm, probably in favorable lights. It's not a solicitation to buy or sell these companies, okay? This is for discussion and bringing up things from the past that it was very significant this week. And it's also significant in a larger picture that for the doomsayers out there, this is a technology that's going to change everybody's life. People aren't aware of that yet. This 5G technology is what would make Jarvis in the Iron Man movies real.
Yeah. That's what you're saying. That
it would actually...
the back and forth between you and a computer is way faster.
Exactly. Incredibly so. So anyway, that's a lot more realistic. What you have nowadays, too, is you have people out there now that they're the doomsayers. It's there was an article in here that, that the recession link, I forget if it's economists or whatever, but it's a joke that economists have predicted 9 of the last 6 recessions. You get that?
Okay.
So economists are always trying to figure out a way to predict recessions, and they suck at it. That's what you need to take away from it. And what's very, very fashionable now is you have literally everybody out there trying to tell you, the listener, when the market's going to go down, when the next recession is going to happen. And they're talking about recession like it's a world war. It's like the one negative thing that isn't occurring right now, but they can think about it, they can dream about it, and they can try to get everybody scared about it, but it's not in front of us right now. And let's talk. I wish we had open phones right now because I would have callers call in and say, okay, we're going to have another recession because they're normal. It's kind of like wintertime.
Yeah.
You know, you love winter, right, Chris?
Oh, yeah. Who doesn't?
Yeah, but it's not for forever. Some are shorter, some are longer, right?
Right.
Yeah, so you haven't moved away from the area because of wintertime.
No, because my only other options are tsunamis, earthquakes, tornadoes.
Okay. Yeah, so you'll take the winter.
I'll take the winter.
It's the least evil.
Yeah, I'll suffer through 5 months of snow.
5 months. Yeah. Was it 5 months this year?
Oh, at least.
Oh, come on. You're biased. You would say 7. Snow to Chris is somewhere, somehow. He saw white stuff. Okay, it's snow now.
I measure the year by when I can wear shorts.
Okay.
And there's snow on the mountains.
So. Okay. So, a recession isn't a big deal. It's a contraction of business being done in the United States economy. Okay? It's normal. It's temporary. It doesn't take everything to zero. So the first thing that I want you, the listener, to put in the bank is that recessions are normal and they're not going to kill you. It's not fun, but it's not some evil thing that's going to happen. It's just the normal ebb and flow of capital life. When you have a democracy that's based on capitalism, things are going to ebb, things are going to flow. That's what happens. So the journalists that are trying to dream up something negative so that they can sell more airtime or more clicks or do whatever, don't feed into that. Or if you're going to read the article, take a deep breath and say they're talking about something that's really not all that bad and it's completely temporary in nature, and they're going to hit it really hard because the last recession that we had came after a huge blow off. So it was one of the bigger times that we would ever, it was one of the more negative times that we ran into as far as, recent history, but it was also incredibly normal. The blow off in the market that we had in 2007, 8, and 9 was normal. Doesn't mean it happens often. I'm just telling you it's normal. There's been several of those. So when you look at it, when you tell yourself an actual true story, that that recessions don't kill you, that they don't last for forever, crashes don't kill you, they don't last for forever. And if you were to back up for far enough so a year becomes 5 years, 5 years becomes a decade becomes 30 years, when you start to back up and take a look at that, and you take a look at the mountain chart that's created, you'd have to, the honest story that you're going to have to tell yourself is that the downs are temporary and the ups are permanent. Okay? That's really all you need to know. And it's so simple that if you're listening to this right now, you probably think that I'm lying or there's more to it. No, I'm the one guy that's telling you that no matter how wonderful things look in the next couple of years or how negative they look in the next couple of years, people are going to behave more or less the same like they always have. They're not all of a sudden going to behave differently. It's kind of what drives me crazy when you have sustainable investing and sustainable economies and so on. People need to figure out what the word sustainable means and what they want it to mean for them. I got into a little bit last week where you had people, where people want all of a sudden companies, they want the companies to be the angels out there. They want the companies to be the doers of good. And many times they are, and many times they aren't.
I think people see that, though, and the movies make it that way. Every business that someone works in is always trying to do good. They never talk about the bottom line. They always talk about this product will help so many people.
Yeah, no, when you distill what I do down to a very simple way, two things. I psychologically reassure clients, and I'm kind of a hired killer where I'm supposed to try to earn my clients' money. It's pretty much those two things, and that is it. So I have to deal, like I said in last week's show, in the real world, not in something that I'd like it to be, not in something that makes me feel good. I have to deal with the situation at hand with no bullshit in there. Absolutely straight truth. So that's what I do. So if you're looking for some straight truth out there right now from me, that's a little bit more specific and not me telling you that the downs are temporary and the ups are permanent. Here's what's going on. Most people think that companies are overvalued, and you'll hear it on the news and internet all the time. Stock market's too high, companies are too high. No, it's not. Here's where things are a little bit crazy. Number one, I was in an Uber car, and they were also a Lyft driver, and they were telling me that they had just taken some Gonzaga finance grads somewhere, finance or,
economic students?
Yeah, I think they were finance, and they were all excited and telling this driver that he should participate in the new IPO, initial public offering of Lyft that's coming to the market, where Lyft they came to the market, which means you can buy stock in the company. This is from kids that are going to a pretty wealthy school instead of working. They might work at the same time. I'm not going to throw them completely under the bus, just halfway, just their legs. And it's like, okay, they're going to Gonzaga, riding an Uber instead of riding a bike, and all of a sudden, they're God's gift to the world as far as advice, and they have the temerity to tell somebody that's driving Uber that probably never went to Gonzaga, telling them to invest in this company Lyft. Never mind that Lyft doesn't have any profits. Never mind that Lyft doesn't earn any money. What normal person on earth is going to invest in a company that doesn't make any money? It's like buying a car that doesn't run. Who's going to do that? No one. It's useless. If a company doesn't make you any money, it's useless. There you go. If a knife is dull, it's useless. That's what their advice was. Useless. I happened to be in there and I set the driver straight and I said, don't follow the advice of these snot-nosed kids that were born with silver spoons. They are not driving Uber, are they? They're not out there working. They're not flipping burgers. They had some professor tell them how wonderful the capitalist world is, that this IPO's coming. They don't know anything. So don't follow the advice of people that don't know anything, that haven't even basically participated in life yet. They're just kind of learning. So you've got those people out there that are so willing to give you advice, but yet they don't know anything. That's pretty much how life is.
Excited that they had knowledge.
Yeah, but no understanding. Here's where things are a little bit weird right now. You're starting to get IPOs come to market where the companies don't have any earnings. So that's one freaky situation there. You have another freaky situation that is when people have cash, and there's a lot of it out there, the rates that the bank will pay you on cash are still abnormally low, only 1% to 2%. So people that have a lot of cash that are, quote unquote, afraid of the stock market, they're trying to put the money someplace else to earn something. And that's where we have a little bit of a bubble taking place. What people don't realize is that in January 2007, and that was about a year before the you-know-what hit the fan, you had almost, it's 19.7, 20%, let's just call it, of sub-investment grade companies. That means companies that are floating bond issues, companies that need credit, that have debt on their books. Sub-investment grade borrowers, which were rated CAA to C on Moody's, that bottom rung of the, let's call them high-risk companies that still need debt, was 20% of the whole category. Okay? Now that number is 43.6. So you have twice the amount of sub-investment grade borrowers has doubled since 2007. What does that tell you? That tells you that companies now that aren't extremely well run have too much debt, and they've accumulated a lot of this debt because the interest rates have been so low that it doesn't hurt them to go out and get the debt initially. It's kind of what's happened with GE. GE's gone down so much because they had too much debt, and then all of a sudden their earnings go down just a smidgen. Then all of a sudden the people that own the debt, the bankers, realize GE isn't going to be able to pay off this debt, so the bankers have been making GE sell off their stuff so that they can have their money back more quickly. So there's two sides to this equation, is you've got these companies that are able to go out and get more debt, even though they're not making enough money to pay it off because the interest rates are abnormally low. And on the flip side, you've got interest rates that are abnormally low, which means that the people that are in the banks and the credit unions with their cash, they don't want to invest it in the stock market, and I get that. I agree with them. They're trying to get some sort of interest on that money because it's abnormally low. And now they're looking for any place else. And what did I just talk about? These sub-investment grade bonds and sub-investment grade fixed income products that are available to people, they've been buying those. So it's a perfect storm. You've got the companies that aren't profitable enough that need more of this debt, and then you have consumers that are okay with buying this high-risk bond because they think, in quotation marks, that it's safer than the stock market. So probably when we do get a decline of prices in companies in the stock market, which is normal, it happens once every 5 years typically, I bet what's going to happen, if I was going to cast my prediction, is that what's going to start the bad news out there is going to be the bond market. And about 6 months later, that will translate into the stock market going down for some period of time. I don't know how long. I don't care. I don't know when, and I don't care. But it seems to make sense to me when you've got these sub-investment grade companies not earning enough to cover their debt, and you've got a whole bunch of people that just think stocks cause cancer, so they're looking for literally anything else. Oh, here's something else. It's something that I don't quite understand, but the person telling me about it said it's not in the stock market, so it's got to be safer than that. I'm game. And there you have your train wreck. And that is my mic drop, the end of the show.
Well, look at you.
Yeah.
Is this steak? Well, it's meat. Well, is it steak? Well, it's meat. I think that's kind of what you were saying there.
Yeah, exactly.
All
Anyway,
right.
Thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back again in a week.
Remind everyone that you named a bunch of people.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of companies out there that I named. They're just for discussion purposes. It's not solicitations to buy or sell at all. You should not do that. If you're thinking about investing in a company, do your research or try to get some very good professional help.
All right. And don't forget to visit smartinvestingshow.com. It has all the links to Facebook, YouTubes, and all that other good stuff.
Yep. Thanks for listening.
Any opinions expressed herein are given in good faith and are subject to change without notice and are correct only on the stated date of issue. Past performance is not always indicative of future results. This material is not intended as an offer or solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security or other financial instrument. Security, financial instruments, or strategies mentioned may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, or income from any investment mentioned in this report may fall against the interest of the investor, and the investor may get back less than the amount invested. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as a recommendation of particular securities, financial instruments, or strategies to you. Before acting on any recommendation on this material, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances, and if necessary, seek professional advice.